Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple, creator of Blood and Brass, which we'll be getting into tonight. The one and only Alexander Koenig, or just Alex. How you doing today, man?
Doing great.
Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for I would have said braving time zone hell, but you and I are in the same time zone, so
yeah, makes it a little easier.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess I'll start with the humble beginnings, in a sense. I'd like you to walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Oh, my first introduction was actually pretty rocky. I had a gaming session with some people playing some D&D, and I read through some of the rules, and the guy wasn't exactly following them right, and to the point of making it unfun for other people, so I almost actually quit right then. But then I decided to run the game for other people because I thought, hey, some of this still seems fun. And from then on, I started GMing more consistently, making more rules myself, and I haven't stopped GMing since.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I jumped through a lot of systems to get to that point, and I realized I have a pretty good knack for rules in general, and I had made so much extra rules for so many other things, I might as well make my own game. So that's how I got where I am now here.
Mm-hmm. And now with that in mind, Blood and Brass is ostensibly a industrial fantasy / steampunk kind of game. So I'm curious what some of the other media that would fill in the Appendix N might be when it comes to it.
Well, I tried to remove as much of the it's necessarily steampunk from the base book, so that way it could be used in other ways, but since it does stick around that kind of fantasy, it stays in that realm of like 1800 to 1920, so any kind of game in there, try and add some stuff in so you could do like a Call of Cthulhu style thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have in the works a little kind of, it's like a branch thing. It's essentially the retro-futuristic to dystopian future style games. Since the book itself doesn't have any, well, not any, but removed most of the stuff from my own personal games just to make it a universal system. Eventually I want to do campaign books to bridge the gaps into those other things and give strong examples of what to do.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to other media, whether it be other RPGs, whether it be books, whether it be film, whether it be television, whether it be music, what would be some of the things that were a bit of an inspiration for the kind of direction you'd want to take Blood and Brass?
Oh, I'd love to do anything with actual video games eventually, and with the inspiration I've taken from many games like The Darkest Dungeon is a pretty big influence, but so is Dishonored and a few other more gritty games and systems. Essentially following their footsteps, making something similar to a game that I've already enjoyed and has inspired this already would be a good fit. But specifically, all I have my sights on right now are writing the campaign books and then the books themselves. That's all I'm really setting my hopes up for.
Yeah, I get that, and it definitely looks like, from my perspective, that there's a lot of 3.5 era D&D DNA within this. And
yeah, for sure.
was it a case where you ended up house ruling like your own D&D campaigns, and then you just house ruled your way into making a whole different system?
That's effectively what happened. Yeah, it was we did a lot of 5th edition, and I was looking through it, and I realized there's a lot of things missing, a lot of mechanics that are implied but don't exist, or references to things in the past and how things work, but the stat blocks didn't have them. And when I looked into it, it's because they're referencing things from 3.5.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the things you look at, like Baldur's Gate, a lot of the improvements they made were bringing things from either Pathfinder or 3.5, and Pathfinder itself is a variant of 3.5. So looking into it, I just ended up reinventing a lot of the things they already had, and so to refine my own, I kind of looked at what they did and said, well, if that worked, why change it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. Now, what if someone is coming into this from 3.5 primarily? What would you say would be some of the things you'd bring up that are gonna be different than what they're used to? Like some of the high points. Obviously, there's gonna be minor things, but the big things that would change.
So there's no true leveling system. You get XP and you can buy traits and ranks and in a similar ways that you can in 3.5, but there's no rigid level structure. You don't choose a class and then you're stuck in that class. There's no multi-classing technical. There is, but you can buy the class and then you buy the upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
It's not you gain this ability at this level and then at this level and this level. It's you have XP, you can buy something that's available, and that's a little different to get used to. And since there is no leveling, there's no level skilling for things like HP or your attacks and your powers. That's all gotten through loot and through the upgrades you buy. So it's not gonna force your hand, which is nice because you're not being forced to do anything. You're not stuck in a structure, but it means you don't have that to rely on. A lot of people go, oh, well, I'm just going to get this at these levels because that's the way you play the character. That doesn't exist, so you'll have to get around that.
Mm-hmm. It also looks to me that you use the whole 6 seconds thing in a kind of AP system. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah. Since there's 6 seconds in a turn, which is something D&D made up initially, and pretty much every tabletop has taken since, because it's just a very handy amount of time when you're dealing with combat, because a second when you're in a dangerous scenario is a long time. And so 6 is a decent amount of actions you can take. And for me, I took that very literally, and your action points are the seconds in the turn. I suppose another big change would be there's no bonus actions or reactions. You either save your time or borrow time for your next turn, so you don't have to worry about opportunity attacks, but if they have time left over, you know that they can hit you, and you can do the same things.
Which I always understood what the intent of opportunity attacks was, but it did create a unforeseen problem, and that is disincentivizing people from disengaging with a particular close range encounter.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd have people.
The idea that you could flee, kind of. If you're gonna get hit 8 times, maybe it's better just to get hit once and stay in the combat. And it kind of locks you into that you have to win the encounter mentality. Yeah.
Or stop me if you've heard this one before. You've got somebody in a melee engagement with an enemy, but they need to get back to their allies in order to benefit from some sort of heal or support them or something. But if they do that, they run the risk of a free shot at them, so they don't take that risk and they stay where they are.
Mm-hmm. Often to their detriment or the detriment of others, because the immediate disbenefit outweighs in their mind the possibilities of the good things in the future. Yeah. No, for sure. Speaking of that, and in 5th edition and more modern games, when you hit 0 hit points, you go unconscious. It's kind of bad, but if you get 1 hit point, you're back in it. So that, for the same reasons, it makes healing a little weird. I wanted to make sure that there was negatives for doing that, and you can avoid going down by taking injuries, which isn't something I've seen in a lot of games, but I've seen almost implemented in a few. And that's these injuries will break your arm, but it reduces incoming damage. So in this scenario where your fighter's surrounded by all these bad guys and wants to leave, maybe breaking their ankle, but getting to a point where they'll get healed and they can survive is now an option.
Mm-hmm. And in further going on with that, I know you said earlier that there isn't really the class thing, but you do have classes, but they appear more to be archetypes.
Yeah, they're kind of like traits plus. They're like little skill trees almost.
Yeah, and actually, I suppose referring to them as skill trees in the way that skill trees are in, say, an ARPG like Diablo might be a little closer to the mark.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And given the fact that unless I'm mistaken, the only thing that you need to do in order to multi-class is just spend 4 XP as a buy-in for a new class.
Yep, and you're limited to a total of 3 of them. That's the only real places that you have to make sure to pay.
Yeah. And given that this wasn't outright listed on the document you had sent me, but is it a case where you have to spend from top down, or can you get them in any order you like as long as you can pay up?
Any order you like. There's a few exceptions where some of them have you can buy this multiple times, and in which case they're either ordered or they have bulletins and you can choose any of the options. But if you have an ability and you want it right now, you can.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest example is the rogue. They have a sneak attack ability that they can buy in. So when you become a rogue, you don't innately have sneak attack. It's an option, but you don't, need to have it. You can get some of the more thievery style things first.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to, you can shotgun and go straight to the end and get the best sneak attack at character creation. It's pretty much all you can do, but man, can you do it well.
Yeah. Before I'll get into the classes per se in a moment, but one of the other things I did want to kind of focus on, because I enjoy that it's present here, is the fact that you, instead of AC, you have active dodge, or doge on some of the pages.
Yeah. Some of my spell check is pretty goofy, makes some funny scenarios.
But I'm guessing that was to get away from the contradiction that happens with your primary defense being referred to as armor class, and it determines whether or not you get hit.
Yeah, kind of. And so that way it makes more sense that when you're laying down, even if you're like, fully plated up, it's not, you're unable to dodge, and that's the problem. It's not that your armor for some reason is just, just as effective or ineffective in really weird scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
That an armor in real life gets run through with weaponry all the time. The real benefit is that it causes things to ricochet. And so I kind of wanted to reflect that in the with the naming and kind of the implications that it brings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. And with that in mind, obviously with the classes that you do have, there's a lot more of them than normal, which is understandable when you're dealing with this skill tree like design, in a way that is kind of reminiscent of Spheres of Power, but that uses the level system, so that's another matter entirely. But
yeah,
with some of I'd like to go through what you've got with them, and I am aware that with some of these they're going to be similar to their 3.5 counterparts, so we can kind of go into where they diverge.
Okay.
And first one would be Bard. So what would be different from your Bard compared to the OG?
They're fairly similar, but they don't have innate magic. They have a lot of the same abilities of talking and being able to inspire people. And specifically, they do have an inspiration die. It's their specific resource. These first classes all will have an attribute-derived resource.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some combo classes later and whatnot. But this one, it goes off of your social, which is your charisma. And I feel like social's a little bit better of a name there, because a lot of people get fused on how charisma works. Because they think, cute or sexy means high charisma, and ugly or brutish is low charisma, but it's not exactly right.
You know what the funny thing about that is? The OG, one of the earliest DM's guide addressed that.
Yeah. Uh,
And they specifically
but
brought up Napoleon as somebody who was charismatic, but certainly wasn't a pretty boy.
My favorite example is a lion versus a kitten.
Mm-hmm.
A kitten can mew and be very cute, and you say, "Oh, how adorable," and then it can, bite you and hiss at you, and you say, "Oh, how adorable." But a lion, if a lion bites you or yells at you, you get very scared.
Mm-hmm.
But if it acts like a kitten, you go, "Oh, look, it's just like a baby kitten."
Mm-hmm.
So that's high charisma versus low charisma. Is the lion has high charisma? It can convince you of being either. And the bard plays off of that with its, just having the high stat. It doesn't have a lot to boost those individually.
Yeah.
But that's stat is there. There's also empathy I put into the socials, so it's instead of being an intelligence or logic thing to kind of what is it? It's intuition, or what is it? I forget. In D&D, but basically the vibe check skill is a social thing because it's your social understanding.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're doubling down on the whole diplomancer thing that Bard evolved into.
They have those kind of things. One of their better ones is the distracting performance down there.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that you can do this performance and it's distracting to all the bad guys, so your allies get some bonuses to doing things. But mostly they're there to give you those inspiration bonuses, and you don't need an instrument, you don't need to do anything. It's more about the true intent and meaning of a bard. You are an entertainer, you're a big talker.
Yeah, and I'm glad that instruments aren't necessary, because that's another trap that people have fallen into over the years, of thinking that a bard needs an instrument. Bards are storytellers first and foremost. Music is just a way to convey a story. But
exactly, yeah. And I wanted that to be important there. Like, you can, if you want to bring a harp and say, yeah, it's just my cool jute tunes. That's fine. You can do that, but it doesn't necessarily need it. It's the inspiring words that are their key feature here. You say, hey, remember that big hero? You're just like that guy. And then, that makes you do better.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Berserker is going to be analogous to Barbarian, but it sounds like you wanted to focus Berserker on the rage thing that's key to Barbarians.
And Berserker, if you look into the history of that, it is a raging madman. Usually they were high on shrooms or something else, and so they just didn't feel pain as they went into battle. And so these guys, they get high armor absorption, or the ability to gain it from nothing, and the ability to block and overpower people. So you just run in there, freak out, don't take much damage, and just try and rock. That's it. So they get that. Their big thing is getting extra injuries, which means you can break your arms and legs more than other people. Usually that's a bad thing, but in this, it's the difference between life and death.
Yeah, and whenever it comes to Berserkers, I always remind people that Berserker translates to bear shirt. Now, whether that's wearing bear skin as a shirt or wearing nothing up there, is up in the air. It's what happens when you're trying to translate ancient languages. Yeah. But some myths have the implication that they're possessed by, like, wolf spirits, which is an interesting possibility.
There's a lot of stories about them having connections to animals, and I didn't quite make that a thing. However, I have a mixed class I haven't figured out that makes them a Beastmaster and a Berserker combo, and you get benefits off your beast. But I haven't added any ties, just because I wanted it to be a generalist kind of thing. And also, you could just be a really angry guy in a bar with this style of Berserker.
Now, with Bounty Hunter, I think the only early Bounty Hunter in 3.5 was maybe just a car, and the Bounty Hunter class that was in OG Star Wars D20, the one that people don't like.
Yeah, the one they really hate.
I didn't hate it, but it came out way too early, because it came out less than a year after 3.0.
Mm. Oh yeah, no, I just have some people. I haven't played that one, but I've heard about people getting upset about it. I personally don't have any stake in the game there.
I've told people, just if you want D20 in Star Wars, just go to Saga Edition and thank me later.
I see.
But with the Bounty Hunter, was it? I think what was the class fantasy you were trying to go for with it?
There's a very specific way of playing bounty hunters that everyone always kind of goes toward. Of this kind of cool guy looks for the bounty, sees the target, kills the mark, and they're very dedicated to their job. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. Why isn't there a class for this in the game? And then if you play Darkest Dungeon, one of the characters is a bounty hunter. So I decided to take inspiration, see how many of his abilities would easily translate to a tabletop setting. And quite a few of them worked pretty good. Especially with the little, like they have a comic and stuff you can read, and it's just like a little animatic thing. But it shows him like busting through a door, beating down some people at a bar, taking out like 3 dudes, and like punching through. This guy like holds like a chair or something to block it, and he just beats through it. And that kind of ultra badass manhunter kind of feel. I wanted to get that through.
Mm-hmm.
And then the trapper thing typically kind of just gets tacked onto ranger at the end. So I decided the bounty hunter who hunts people should probably have the traps.
Usually bounty hunters get paid more if the bounty's warm.
Yeah. And so them having the bear traps for people that, maybe they're not as serrated, kind of helpful. So they have some stuff for getting traps, making the DCs harder, breaking armor and weapons, so that way you can, have the better chance at taking somebody alive, because if they can't hurt you, eventually you wear them down.
Yeah. Now with masterminds, what would the class fantasy be the frontline leader and planner, kind of what the marshal was trying to be? Although I don't know why the marshal is in the
essentially
miniatures handbook.
Yeah. But yeah, that, and then like the Sherlock Holmes, the one that Robert Downey Jr. played, where he does the thing where he sits down and he says, he's going to do this attack and this attack and this attack, so I will counter with this and this and this. That's the kind of idea of where they sit down, they just think of the battlefield and help everybody else around them.
Mm-hmm.
That's best displayed with their ability all according to plan, where they pay some of their points, and then all allies within zone with a 20-foot radius get their your intelligent modifier onto their d20 rolls and damage rolls. So basically every roll other than saves. Then some saves. Most saves are also still d20 rolls. So it's basically everything with the discount of a few very specific rolls. So you can help your whole party just by being with them and around them.
Mm-hmm. I can get that. Now, with Monk, that's a tricky one, because are you familiar with the term MAD, or multiple ability dependency?
Yeah, for sure.
3.5 monks were the poster boy for MAD.
Mm-hmm.
Because unlike say a fighter who, if they've got just a high strength and con, they can more or less get by. A lot of the favored attributes are spread out quite a bit with the monk.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need good strength, good dex, and good wisdom.
And that is also somewhat of a problem here. Unfortunately, because everyone wants the monk to do everything, and that's just hard. However, there is some upgrades that are just straight upgrades, so you don't need a better stat. You can get away with just paying a lot of your points to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these things are passive upgrades to other things. So you probably want to focus on at least 2 stats with the monk. So that's how most of these classes are anyways.
And because of the fact that multiclassing is easy and I'd say borderline encouraged with your setup, I don't think it's going to be as much of a problem here, especially since the main thing that you're going to be concerned about is the logic mod because, that's going to give you more key, and more key means you can do more stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And they combo really well with any of the physical classes, just in general. And Bounty Hunter combos with everything kind of intentionally because it goes off of the accuracy thing, which is just your attacks. So.
Now, with Mechanic, is that meant to be akin to Artificer, but without the magic part of it?
Essentially, yeah. Since the game has a bunch of different mods and it's built around crafting and customization, just being able to have somebody who's specifically just good at that is a decent thing. And then having all these extra skills that they're decent with, they're kind of just good at the things people typically don't care about in a battle, and the idea is to give those things use.
Yeah, I can get that. And when it comes to the thug,
yeah,
I suspect that is taking some aspects of the thief and more of the brawler the more combat leaning end of thief rather than the sneaky boy end of thief.
It kind of, yeah. It's really just the power guy. You punch people, you slash people. You are the strong man. You could do it as a knight or anything like that. It's not specific to shady dealings and whatnot. It's really the Hercules thing. But I couldn't think of a better name that kind of just encompassed all of them, because your standard street brawler, your gladiatorial warrior thug guy is, they're all kind of just meathead thugs. So
and with the warrior, the fact that they have an adrenaline system already puts them leagues above the I was going to just focus on the 3.5 fighter, but no, I'm going to throw in most fighter classes and a lot of fantasy games that are taking cues from D&D, because they fall into the same trap. Having the warrior or fighter be Babby's first character who does nothing but basic attack.
Yeah, and then they're kind of made to go together, thug and warrior, because it's strength and power. They're kind of two sides. They're the two big ways to fight. You either are overwhelmingly strong or you're very fast and maneuverable. And yeah. So they're both kind of the way I thought of them basically was the Dark Souls characters. You're either the guy that rolls around a bunch, or you're the guy that walks right up and whacks them real hard.
Yeah, the strength build versus dex build.
Yep.
But then there's the combination classes. And are combination classes your analog to like prestige classes? They're ones that have a bit higher floor but have more specialized benefits?
It kind of, and they're also if you look at you were saying there's adrenaline from warrior, there's grit for thug, and going upwards there's all those different combinations here. So these ones have 2 of those stats associated. It does prevent you from taking the other ones. So here, artist is the first one. And it has motivation and inspiration, which means you could not be a mechanic or a bard, but you can be an artist instead. And it has some of their abilities from each of those 2 groups, and then some unique ones that help them do their specific gimmick.
So akin to the hybrid classes in like Pathfinder or late 4th edition.
Yeah. And you don't need any other prerequisites. They're like the other classes. It's just that they do have the combination. Now, their resources can't get as high, but since you have 2 resource pools, it's kind of the balance there. And each of them can regenerate on different rests independently. So you're getting your points back more often. It's kind of like the idea of how Warlock is supposed to work, where every short, you get more short rests so your abilities respawn faster. And my system does put a lot of pressure on people to make rests. You can't just sit down and take one. There is 3 categories and states, and depending on how much things you bring to the rest, it changes. So having more things regenerate on smaller, weaker rests is very important. Because there's the trap of 5th edition where you have one a day ability and several smaller abilities, but they recharge on a short rest. Doesn't matter if you get a full rest every day and you only ever have 1 encounter. So
You know, as somebody who has gotten his fair share of shit for the fact that he enjoyed the AEDU setup in 4th edition, I find
mhm.
it very, very funny when people tell me that the whole short and long rest thing is akin to encounter and daily powers in 4th. Because it really only is a name only.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know. I like the idea of, certain things in structure. I get how it's easier to have one encounter a day, and you want the characters to feel badass and all that. But when you don't follow the way it was kind of intended, it makes, again, like warlocks feel kind of bad. Or like people think monks aren't very good in 5th edition. They get all their stuff back on a short rest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Oh,
why you're not taking short rests.
yeah, I've when it, of course there's also the fact that some things that are once per short or long rest aren't powerful enough to warrant that cost. Um,
Yeah.
like say the capstone for ranger, which is just you can add your wisdom to your attack rolls, like whoopee.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not all. It certainly has its benefit, but its benefit doesn't match the cost. If
Yeah.
you're doing something that you can only do once a day, um, it should be more the number go up. But
Mhm.
moving on, when it comes to the battlesmith, just from that name alone, I get the vibe that the class fantasy was intended to be things like rune mage or rune caster, those sort of characters.
Yeah, where you go out, you have your stuff, and you're like, oh, this is mine, and therefore it's better. Look at this. Bam. You have a cool ability. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, they don't have, again, there's not a lot of magic here because I'm still working on the magic system. So they're pretty absent of magic currently.
and I'll get, since you're working on the magic system, I'll get this out of the way first. Do you intend on using the spells per day Vancian model, or do you have a different approach you want to take?
Well, spells are a little annoying to describe. It's one of those things when you have a visual, it's way easier. But I guess the easiest way to describe it is you have a mana pool, and that can let you cast spells. They have different mana values, but each spell has variant ways to be cast. If you add chanting or gestures or different rituals, it can add or subtract the value. So I think technically, it's a mana bar system,
Which
but you can mess with it to make
yeah.
it not that.
So it definitely sounds like it's that the three factors of the Vancian model aren't present, which honestly I'm glad for. When I started when I was a little kid, I wasn't a fan of the Vancian model, and as an adult, I'm still not a fan. Oh,
Mm-mm.
there's various reasons why, and I've done whole articles discussing it, but it boils down to I don't have a reason given as to why magic works this way, and
Mm.
I feel like by having a limited set of charges, it ends up inadvertently creating the rainy day paradox, as I call it, also known as 99 megalixirs.
Yeah.
I can't use one of my potions now. What if I need it for later? He says while he's at the b-bag of the whole damn campaign.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Whereas
No, there's
MP, in this case, it's another kind of resource. So
yeah. It's
it's easier.
everything's
to
a resource.
I think it's easier for people to grasp. Casting spells makes you tired, versus cast this third spell, you can't cast anything more.
Yeah, well, why can I cast 8 more higher level spells and not my first level spell anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, exactly.
I remember trying to rationalize it with people implied to have a spell deck that they were they were putting magic cards into a specialized firearm, because I really wanted to rip off the caster from Outlaw Star. So
I do have a tarot card caster, actually, since you were mentioning that.
Because I figured that'd be an easy enough way to rationalize it. Oh, you can't cast any spells because you're out of cards.
Hmm. I heard a really good way for doing it was for how like they did it in 3.5 with wizards. They had this guy would write out his spells for the day, and then he'd tear off pieces of that paper and say, "Ah, see, there you go. There's my one." And he was basically out of magic tickets that day, so he couldn't do it.
Oh.
Another guy did he had to re-ink himself every single day, and so he looked at his arm and said, "Oh, see, no more pictures of fireballs. I guess I'm out."
Yeah.
That was pretty good. But that's a justification for something that exists in the game, not something that the game is giving you.
Yeah, and
So
ultimately, I don't. Those kind of things are fun, but they shouldn't be necessary to address that kind of thing.
yeah, you don't want something to require something to continue the immersion. Like it should have it already.
Oh yeah. Now with Commander, I get the vibe from that of, again, even more so the Marshal, but also the Warlord from 4th, because that scratched an itch people didn't know they had.
Yeah.
I know some people say the Battlemaster in 5th is the incarnation of the Warlord. It's not.
No, I mean it's got a lot of fun stuff, and it is my favorite of the fighter classes to play. But it's not. It's different.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the Barrel, I'm guessing this is where that concept you mentioned before of the Berserker possessed by a wolf spirit kind of manifests.
Yeah, this is my first little thing here because you have ki and you have rage.
Mm-hmm.
So you are essentially a monk, but you're using it in a very different way. It's your attunement with nature rather than your actual like sitting down and meditative practices that are giving you bonuses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have a lot of stuff about like natural healing and doing stuff in nature. And you don't necessarily need to be in nature. Some of the things are you spend a die, and now this is like quote your den, therefore you have to defend it, and you get bonuses.
Yeah. And when it comes to the fighter, was the class fantasy you're going with that the weapon master or the professional soldier kind of approach?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have the ability full march to ignore difficult terrain. So that's not something people normally care about. But if you're in a campaign where you have to do like a not just a west march, but like a real west march, you are physically marching from here to there.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, having all these little soldier benefits works.
Yeah.
And they're the warrior thug combo. They get the sweeping and multi attack, so they get the two kind of really big things, but they don't get it all the way like the other one does, or the other two do.
Yeah. Now, with Mercenary, since that has dedication and adrenaline, what would be the class fantasy in that compared to the fighter?
This one, it's more of if you bring back to the Dark Souls thing, imagine you wanted to do again that more dodge rolly kind of getting out of the way combatant, but you also are you're here for a purpose. You're going to take that guy down. So it's like the more dedicated hunter versus the soldier. It's kind of again, imagine you have like a soldier regiment, a group of guards. They're all kind of in uniform. That's the fighter. But that weird guy that they hired from the bar to like take out a few guys, that's the mercenary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. And Mind Palace, that isn't using that term alone is an interesting thing because you don't see a whole lot of games tackle the concept of the Mind Palace. It's certainly been a thing in certain papers, ones that I'm not paying money to dig up.
Yeah.
If you've done any sort of scholarly work, you know how much of Royal Pain's citations are.
Yeah.
But would the fantasy of the Mind Palace be more of the meditation centric monk, the key sage, essentially?
Yeah, that with the again like I use the example of the Sherlock Holmes kind of thing. Just imagine that, but he doesn't have all the other prowess. He's just the investigator portion of that. If you played, there's a they changed the name of it. Never mind. I don't know the current name of it. But there's a decent several decent Call of Cthulhu inspired games. And so almost all of them have a little mind temple, and quite a few investigator games have it where you physically you look at it and you kind of have a little like investigator board essentially in your head.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that idea as something. So they have two different paths: thought temple and mind board, and they let you do those things independently.
Yeah, I never got a chance to actually dig into it, but I remember a game called Fallen Reich that had this concept of character creation vis-a-vis a board game.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
and
the big thing with these Mind Palace guys is that they have extra seconds, so they get free action points. Is essentially the way they do, but they can only use it on certain checks, like basically social and investigation, perception, things that you can look at or talk.
Mm-hmm.
So that way it's easier and faster.
And I see Balanced Hydra saying he may have missed it, but is there a Ranger class? Yes, there is. In fact, there's several because of how multi-classing works in this game.
Yeah. There is also a separate Beastmaster, if that's the kind of Ranger you're thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference for Rangers, you're not restricted to specifically bows or blades or anything. Whatever you pick up would be your option. Nothing is named Ranger, however, currently.
Yeah, now there's a part of me that's glad for that, because this might be a bit of a hot take, and I've mentioned this elsewhere, but Ranger has been the has had a third wheel problem, arguably since its inception in AD&D. Because, well, first off, it's kind of hard to build a outdoorsy character in a game where you're going to be in dungeons most of the time, especially in those early days. I think it's the same reason why the Cavalier didn't last. But also the fact that those sort of in-between archetypes, and I'm guessing this is something you planned on addressing as well, they ultimately end up being the worst of both worlds. Being not as good as the other two, but they don't have anything to compensate for. Like somebody who has a little bit of fighty, a little bit of casty, the gish, but they don't have anything unique to them that can't be done by the fighter or the caster. So they just end up being a gimped version of both.
Yeah. No, that's... Yeah, because unless you have something crazy good like the Paladins have, because they're the same thing essentially, right? You could just have played a fighter-cleric combo, but they made a separate class for it, giving it the smiting
but
superpowers.
Paladins have
right?
smite and lay on hands.
And then the rogue didn't get something. Yeah,
the third had their own mount. So that ends up. But I have a feeling, and maybe this is what you end up doing for your game, for your sessions when playtesting this. But you have people come up with a concept and then fill it in with what might fit when it comes to the classes, instead of them picking a class right out of the gate.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I do. I said, think of a hero character from X, Y, or Z genre that you would want to play, and then they get their character. I say, all right, let's build that character, especially for the first few sessions.
Yeah,
I like doing that for the initial 1 or 2 rounds you do of making characters and stuff, just to help them along. Because after that point, they kind of understand what key words are, they kind of get a feel for how the game works, and then they can start thinking about going class first or trait first, building the character backwards, because now they understand. But definitely at the beginning, that is the way to do it, I think.
Yeah. And when it comes to the restricted classes, I'm guessing this is where you'd put the equivalent of prestige classes, or I think in some cases racial paragons.
Currently they're all racial based. And right now, I mean, it's all human subtypes. The different human subtypes. The first one here for the Nyctalope, which is named after the first superhero comic character. He was a French guy. Basically, had his heart ripped out and got it replaced with some robotic components, and this gave him superpowers essentially, because he could up the beating of his heart and whatnot and go faster. He was basically a cyborg. What I have is the deficients. Either you were born without pieces, some way, shape or form. You know, you don't have like you were like a born without lungs that function properly, or some other critical function, or you stepped on a landmine and kind of lived. Some mad scientist said, "Hey, let me put some robot pieces in you." That's what a deficient is. And if you are a deficient, or if you've taken enough critical injuries as a character, then you can take the restricted class Nyctalope. And their whole thing is about falling apart. If you go through their traits, they don't have to pay XP for it. They get negative traits that harmfully impact them, and then, or they just lose maximum of their different health pools to get powers. So like their basic thing that they do have to pay for is necrotizing fasciitis, which is just actual medical terms. And they lose a max from an attribute, but they get an organ plug, and organ plugs give 2 in an attribute, but you can move it around. So you can zip open your chest, change where your organs are connected, close it up, and then your attributes have changed.
Mm-hmm.
They have a few other things that follow the same kind of trait, where they have some part of them is melting off. We made the jokes about one guy's character that his skin fell off. Oops. And in this thing, you get to have some of the robot armors on you, is how that works. You end up installing armor onto your skin. It gives you some bonuses, but it also, has the huge negative if you take it off. Yikes. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly get that. And when it comes to other classes, are these just ones that just don't fit, or would be a little bit higher floor?
I'd say both. Like this Beast Tamer here, it doesn't have an attribute on it,
mm-hmm.
like the other traits did, or the other classes did. And it also doesn't have a racial thing that you're already playing off of. Because the big thing is, let's say you're taking that deficient again, you've already got robot parts at character creation with having been that, and the class just kind of makes that happen even more.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Beast Tamer is, you have a pet, or several, and you give them bonuses, and now you have to change their stats, which means understanding how those stats work, and then giving them bonuses, and it doesn't rely on any one specific skill or ability. They're more sided toward a few, but like you don't have a rigid, do this now, this is how you play this character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true for the other ones here that keep going. Sigil Bearer is probably the hardest one to get because it requires your other people getting traits for you. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of my version of Paladin. They don't have any magic. Yeah. But for every sigil they have on them, gives them a sigil charge. So, you have your symbol of your family house, your country, or something similar. And you say, hey, I believe in this code, and if you do too, we get powers. And then by expending the usefulness of the sigil, you say, see this flag? It's very important, and then people get benefits.
Yeah.
Giving them extra armor, giving them bonuses on saves, letting them heal a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Which, that's something I hadn't covered. There's 2 health pools that you have to care about. There's your health. That's your flesh health.
Mm-hmm.
It is you. Very important to you. And if that runs out, then you die. And then there is stamina, which is an equivalently large health pool, but drinking coffee can have caffeine in it, which means you can heal stamina off of it. You can take a little breath and just feel fine. It's the health of, you didn't actually get hit, you dodged. It's one of the ideas I liked from 5th edition, where when creatures are at half health, they're considered bloodied, and now you can tell they're at half health. People can tell when you're tired, essentially. And it's really easy to heal, so that way the system isn't as harsh as it could be. Because, you have one health pool you don't really care about, you're going to get it back pretty much guaranteed every time you take a rest. But the other one is your meat and bones, and that's very important to you. Or at least it should be.
Mm-hmm. And considering that,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to go a bit into traits. Would that be the equivalent of what feats were intended to be?
Yeah, basically. I would say that's the best way to describe it.
And I'll note what I mean and why 5e I feel kind of dropped the ball when it came to feats, or at the very least missed the point. Is feats, when they were a successor to the proficiencies concept that was introduced late into AD&D Second, and it was intended as a means to personalize characters beyond just their choice of race and class. 5e, I think, dropped the ball by having feats as an alternative to ASI, because I feel like that kind of missed the point. And I feel validated in that because so many classes have essentially feats in all but name, looking right at you, Warlock.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Like a lot of the invocations that Warlocks had, those would have been feats in any other game. I mean, and whenever I bring this up, somebody's like, yeah, but who wants to deal with 10,000 feats? Well, nobody does. I've talked about the feat tax and feat chain problems all day. But if you you can swing that pendulum too far the other way.
Yeah, and I feel like I get a little close to having too many, but a lot of them, if you're not building that kind of character, you just ignore them. I feel like that helps.
I think what allows you to dodge the problem here is that there isn't a trait tax. Since all of them are costing XP, and you don't have anything. Do you remember Whirlwind Attack? And how ridiculous the prerequisites were for what essentially is the spin move that's been in every Legend of Zelda game since Link to the Past.
Yeah.
You needed like 3 or 4 different feats, and you needed 2 abilities above 13. So you'd have to, even if you were playing fighter, you'd have to plan your moves several levels in advance, and at that point, it's a false choice problem.
Yeah, because you need to choose these options to get the end result. It's just when you choose to get them is the only option you really have. Do you want to wait 8 more levels or not?
Yeah, and when it comes to negative traits, what would someone get aside from the downsides of it? What would someone get from taking a negative trait?
They would get 2 XP per rank of the trait if it has ranks, and that is equivalent to the amount of XP it takes to get a positive trait. So you directly trade problems for benefits. And in my experience, you either get 1 or 0, or you get as many as you possibly can. That's how every person has built it so far.
Yeah. And it does lead to the possibility of min-maxing. But
I encourage that in my game.
From what I've seen, it's definitely encouraged, and I've seen a lot of people take the approach when it comes to balance that we need to make sure that nobody's too OP. Personally, I think we should take the opposite approach. If everyone's borked, no one is.
Sure. I think the only time it's an issue is if, say, me, you, and another person are playing a game. I've built a mediocre character filled with backstory, yada yada yada. And you've built a mediocre character filled with backstory, yada yada yada. And they made the perfect attack machine. Then when the GM's making encounters, we either die immediately, and then he has an equal fight, or we have an alright fight and he outshines us in every way. That's the only time it's really an issue. And long as everyone understands how to build characters and they're all on the same page, it's not usually an issue. I've only really encountered it once, but the person was kind of trying to make a bad character, because that was like the thing, is that they weren't good at anything, and they were accidentally getting into adventures and stuff. And so it was like annoying to deal with, but it was the intent. So since I knew they weren't upset, I think that's the other thing. You don't want your players to be upset. That makes you feel bad. That makes them feel bad. And so long as you know that your players aren't upset by the balance problems, then you're good. And with my game here, even if you min-max your character all the way, there's always a weakness. You can never get rid of all of them. And usually it comes in the form of swarms. Lots of rats kill everybody.
Rats fall, everyone dies.
Yeah.
But it also appears to me that the typical skill system that is seen in a lot of games where you just have a bunch of skills that are tied to attributes isn't as present here. Is it a case where you're just doubling down on attributes?
There is a bunch of skills. If you go way up to the top here, let's see here. I mean, there is a massive list of them, but they're kind of suggestions.
Yeah.
There's a total of 50 skills, and you can get all of them on a rank of 1 to 5. But if you have a decent stat and you have a decent skill, they kind of cancel out. If you have a +3, you're doing pretty decent in this game, because you have either a good stat or a good thing. But there's a lot of cases where you can use skills, quote, wrong. So like, let me see here. Finesse is, there's a finesse skill that is cooking. You might be able to say that you use intelligence instead because of a certain circumstance. That's like encouraged. That's encouraged. It's the typical way this thing's going to work. If you have overpower, is a skill that lets you, bash stuff, grapple things. It's you are stronger than something else skill. You might be able to use intelligence instead of power because you decided to use a lever. You can manipulate it. It's not as important, but there is still a bunch of skills to pay attention to.
And I think one of the major problems with skill systems like 3.5 is kind of avoided here, because unless I'm mistaken, your choice of class doesn't affect what skills you can and can't get all that much. What affects what skills you're going to be better or worse at is your attributes.
Yeah, and then how much XP you spend in getting ranks. Those are the only real differences. Yeah, you're not limited on what you can get. You can always get basically anything as long as you don't have something that says otherwise. Like you are limited to 3 classes, and then some traits will say, hey, you can't have this one.
And
but that only happens a handful of times.
And it looks to me like none of the classes are really the dedicated skill monkey.
Yeah, no, the closest would be the Bard, because they have an ability that gives them some temporary bonuses, but nothing is, like, set in stone on being Skill Monkey. If you want to build that, you're probably just not going to buy any classes or traits. You're just going to put all your stuff into skills, which is a completely fine way to do it.
Yeah, I can get that. And one of the big elephants in the room when it comes to this sort of thing is crafting. Obviously, I talked about how 5th edition didn't even try, unfortunately. And there's been varying levels of success when it comes to crafting systems in games. A lot of them go certainly in the overwrought end of things. I could bring up the magic item crafting system from 3.5.
Yeah.
With the whole I'm leveling down to build this thing.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
I remember that. Oof.
How do you handle crafting? I know you've got several subtypes.
Yeah, so if you're building a basic thing, let's say you're building a chair, I don't have any stats for that in the game, but your GM could go to the crafting area, find materials, find wood material, and say, all right, it's going to take 12 of those. Now you have a market value and a true value, or if you cut down a tree, you don't care about value. And you're able to build it that way. But if you're building something more complex like a gun, all the parts in the gun have their own independent value, and you can assemble them. So you can do barrel, you have to choose a barrel, receiver, grip, stock, maybe something above it, such as like a scope or some kind of sight. Then there's smaller modifications you can make. Each of those parts has a value in the market, which is how much it's sold for generally, and then its true value, which is the value of the materials made to make that part. It's a lot to think of right off the bat, but once you look at it and follow the process through one, everything follows the exact same process. It's very easy to understand. It just takes a second to learn it. So let's say you wanted a barrel. It's made of metal general parts, because a general part in this is defined as a regular material that has been worked. Material is a plain object, so for metal, you would have a thing of sheet metal, or a ingot. That would be metal material. If you turn it into a pipe, like for this barrel, that would be a general part. And then when you do that, then you have that part, you now have a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how easy it is. Fine parts are more like screws and nuts and bolts, but they follow the exact same rules. And you can make general parts and fine parts out of materials. And that's the general crafting for everything that's like a physical object. All the things, all the cars, the guns, the swords, everything follows those exact same rules. And anything you can destroy can be scrapped, so you can get half of their true value worth of materials that are in the object. So you couldn't get wood from breaking a sword, but you could get a single thing of metal material from breaking a decently large sword.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to the little bit weirder, there is crafting poor, crafting average, crafting good. This is for pretty much everything else. Normally it's used for foods. You have flop, that's poor food, poor crafting food. Then there would be average, so an apple, some meat. Average, good quality would be the gourmet stuff, the bacon wrapped sausages and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And that follows the same rules for like there's home chemical. So instead of saying having bleach and having cleaning salts and baking soda and baking powder and all that little stuff, I just have crafting. It's just generally labeled as crafting, just for ease. I do have little categories pre-made, but you don't have to follow them exactly. If you want gunpowder, I have crafting explosive. There you go. It could be phosphorus, it could be sulfur, it could be just actual gunpowder. Who knows? And then there's the special chemicals, which is how you make poisons, medicines, and potions.
Mm-hmm.
And they have different combination methods. There's poultices and pills and poisons. They all have their own specific rules, but it's basically adding in those ingredients. So instead of buying a health potion, what you could do is you could buy a potion that has Panacea 3 times, and that would give you a certain amount of health and toxin. And something I took from the Witcher series, you can't have too much potions. You will overdose and die. You could argue I took it from the real world too. You take too much, you die. That's just how it is. So there is side effects to certain ingredients. One of the weirder things is because I put poison as a general thing, you can have acidic poison, fire damaging poison, that kind of stuff. Just because it is an ingredient that is causing the effect of a certain damage. So like if you wanted to have like a rash powder, that's technically a poison in the way this game deals with crafting.
Mm-hmm. I can get that. Now, as you were developing Blood and Breast, were there any mechanics or any concepts that you had intended to put in, but through playtesting they ended up getting phased out, or the idea didn't match what it was in your head?
Oh, there was a few of them. Most of them ended up getting reworked in some way. Originally the game was going to be a level-based system,
mm-hmm.
and then your stamina, your health, and your injuries were percentiles of health. Because again, this was originally I was playing 5th edition mostly in 3.5, so I was trying to figure out how to make those things work before I just finally decided to just make something myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was half of your it was half of your total health was converted into stamina, a quarter of your total health was converted into health, and then the final quarter of your health was converted into divided by 5 number of injuries. And it was just too much. I had to simplify it. It wasn't going to work. The math was sound. It worked out as long as you had it divisible by 10 or 5. But, it was too much. And another limiting system I had, I completely got rid of. I didn't even have a name for it, but now it's called fatigue. And what it is certain things you can do are tiring. They make you tired. It's fatigue. You get one of them every time you do said tiring activity, and for each fatigue you have, you gain a -1 globally to everything. It's pretty punishing,
mm-hmm.
but re-rolling a d20 is one of the options you can do, so people use it quite often. There is a trait to mitigate that, and people have been... they really like going all the way to -9 before going, maybe I should stop. So,
Yeah,
it's pretty fun.
Everybody's going to push their luck in different ways.
Yeah. I suppose the final thing that really got changed too is the way crits work.
Mm-hmm.
I liked natural 20, you get a bonus. I made it so there's certain extended crit ranges, but I couldn't decide exactly what I wanted for critical effect because just doubling damage doesn't feel great. So I made it so you get a crit effect. One of them, the basic one, is you get +5 damage. But you can do things like give a tier 1 injury. So if you shot somebody in the eye, then you could say, oh, they're a little bit more blind. So their eye now has an injury. And effectively in the battle, this would give them a -1 anytime they do anything that involves seeing, which is, most things. You could hurt them in just a general body, you could hurt them in the arm. Now when they use that arm to attack, now they get a -1. You can do that up to 3 times, because that's how high injuries go. And you can keep giving them different injuries. Alternatively, you could give them different things like bleed, which is a damage over time effect. I have a few different damage over times. If you deal fire damage, then maybe you could choose to set them on fire instead of the extra damage. So you have options, and then the different damage types that you have available, depending on what attack you did, would give you different options for crit effects.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had a flaming rapier that has some kind of serrated mod on it, you might be able to do slashing or piercing or fire damage, and you'd be able to look through all 3 of those lists to find which crit effect that you want to take. But all of them always have the deal 5 extra damage or add an injury. So there's that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly get that. And with that in mind, I know the Kickstarter didn't plan out, but as I understand, you do plan on putting it on Drive-Thru RPG sometime in the future. Do you have a release window that you're shooting for?
The 20th to the 30th February of this year. 2025.
Yeah.
Somewhere between there is when I want to get it out.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be as edited and pretty, although one of my friends did find an editor who's willing to at least do a basic gloss over for some grammar and whatnot. And I myself can try and go over it again and just really go through and find things. But then there's not going to be as many pretty pictures. It's not going to be as stylized. But, it'll still get out, which was the most important thing to me.
And I'm guessing in that version you'll have some form of a character sheet, since that was the only thing that wasn't in the thing you had sent me.
Yeah, I have a automated sheet that I've been using for my groups for trying to test the game out, and I'm trying to figure out how to turn that sheet, add everything that I need to have on that sheet, and then make it look decent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably gonna be a grid, because I don't have the time or money to get somebody to really sit down and make like the perfect one, because there's some really cool stylized character sheets out there. Just it's probably not gonna be not mine.
Yeah. Is all fair. But I'll certainly be keeping an eye out for when that drops. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here. And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody!
遅い上洛が上年関税を5年関税を年々上新規